so much. We're delighted to be in Portland, and I know you need the rain, so if it's raining a little on Thursday, that's okay. One of the things I forgot to mention in opening is that there are about 550 of us here at this conference, and we're just really thrilled with the number of people, but also from the number of countries. In addition to the United States, there are people here from at least 12 other countries, if others may have come in from around the world. So this is definitely has an international flavor, and yesterday in the workshop there was this opportunity, those of us attending the Food for People, Food for Soil workshop and the digestate standards, to get input from the experiences in other countries. And throughout these 2 days of sessions, I think that will definitely be among the highlights. And again, for those of you who maybe came in a little after, lunches and breaks are in the exhibit hall. We have over 60 vendors who are here, and they too have a lot of knowledge and experience to share in addition to the equipment and systems they have available. So our next speaker is Rhys Roth, who is director of the Center for Sustainable Infrastructure at the Evergreen State College in Olympia. Rhys was co-founder of Climate Solutions in 1998 and helped to grow that organization into the Northwest's most important and influential nonprofit addressing climate change. In 2013, Rhys was honored as a sustainability trailblazer. I love that, because of the Portland Trailblazers. In late 2013, he returned to his alma mater, the Evergreen State College, and started and is leading the Center for Sustainable Infrastructure. So, Rhys, you come on up.
All right.
Great to have you here.
I'll put that there. Hey, folks. I'm a little excitable, so I think it's going to be hard for me to be contained right here, and if I go that way, I'm going to fall on my face. So hopefully I can rivet myself here. But thank you for pulling yourselves away from the very riveting announcement of Hillary Clinton and Marco Rubio that they are going to be running for president on a vote a year and a half from now, which kind of makes me jealous for the Brits. They do it in like 6 weeks, right? They just say, we're on, and battle it out, and then it's over. But fortunately, we don't have to talk about that here today. It is a real thrill to be at the BioCycle conference and on this stage. I thought I was a long-time BioCycle fan. I think maybe half my life I've been a BioCycle fan. And then Nora tells me it actually started in 1960. Just before me.
That's right.
Wow. It's astounding. And Jerry Goldstein, your dad, a true pioneer. I mean, you guys, the thing I admire most is just the continuous focus on sustainability innovation at the most practical level. How do we make this work in our communities? And I love that about you guys. And you've kept it fresh, and you've kept it on the cutting edge, and very, very useful for professionals in the field. And you're talking about concepts that were theoretical 40 years ago and are now, you all are implementing them. And you're at the forefront of implementing them. And BioCycle, I think, is an incredible resource. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to talk about maybe the most boring word in the English language. I don't know. It's a word I don't really fully understand. Infrastructure. It's just a weird word, but it's incredibly important. But people are pretty much oblivious to it in the general public. So you flip on the lights, you just count on the lights going on. You turn on the water, on it goes. Bring the recycling and the garbage out to the curb, you never see it again. Flush the toilet, hopefully that gets carried away. So people don't give it a second thought, and yet these systems we can't function as a society without these systems in working order. You can imagine if the lights went out now, it would be a serious crimp on our party here. So these systems are totally vital. They're vital in terms of economic development, in terms of environmental health, and in terms of our quality of life. Just in terms of economic development, again, they're vital. I mean, businesses cannot function without power, without water, without wastewater services, without waste management service, we just can't have a functioning economy. So they're basic, vital necessities, and they need to be affordable for both residents and businesses. You think about all these systems, all those costs really add up on the pocketbook. We have to be able to deliver these services in an affordable way. And infrastructure is also a major job creator and sustainer in our community. A Brookings study last year found that 11% of national employment, over 10%, 1 in 10 jobs, is an infrastructure job. And I kind of had in my mind that these were mainly about building things, these infrastructure jobs, but really almost 3/4 of those jobs are operating and maintaining our existing systems, keeping them working day in and day out. So major job sustainer. And high quality functioning infrastructure is critical for attracting real estate investment and business investment in our communities. So in all those ways, it's critical for economic development and the economic vitality of our communities. We could bullet out a similar list for environmental health and sustainability. We'll talk about that in a second. Quality of life. In all these ways, infrastructure is just vitally important. And we're going to need to spend staggering sums of money on our infrastructure to keep these systems operating. McKinsey says globally, we're talking about in the next 15, 16, 17 years, we're talking about $57 trillion just to keep up with GDP, just to keep these circulatory systems working, not including what we need to invest to build climate resilient communities and systems, just what's in the pipeline. Along the Pacific Coast, CH2M Hill says we're going to need to marshal $1 trillion in the next 30 years from California to BC for our infrastructure systems. And they are vital. They're vital. So we're going to need to spend this money, and it's really about how do we get smart about spending this money to keep these systems working that we vitally need. But we're running a deficit right now. Capital funding is lagging these systems. We built a lot of our infrastructure post-World War II through 1970s. We did a lot of investment. Those systems are getting pretty old, long in the tooth, 30, 40 years, and they're in need of renewal. But state and federal traditional sources that we've relied on, they're starting to dry up, they're shrinking, and we're having revenue stream issues where as we get more sustainable, as we conserve, get more efficient, we're consuming less in some cases, and our revenue is sort of tied to consumption, and so that's creating a problem. We're going to have to sort of redesign and rethink how we structure our revenue streams. So, meanwhile, budgets for O&M are under serious strain at the same time because revenue issues and the costs are escalating for operations and maintenance because these systems are getting so old. And if you defer maintenance, it can cost 2 to 4 times as much to deal with it on a more emergency basis than if you dealt with it along a regular schedule. So all that adds up to the fact that innovation is required. We're going to have to do things differently. Peter Binney, the guy whose quote is here, he won the American Society for Civil Engineers President's Medal for developing what is essentially the LEEDs, you know what LEEDs green building rating system is? He's developed that for sustainable infrastructure, or not him alone, but he was at the forefront of that. And he says, these systems are decadal, long-term systems. We're making investments now that we'll have to live with for the next 50 years. So we can't just replicate the systems that we have. We can't afford it. It won't work from a sustainability standpoint, so we need to innovate. And that's the purpose of the Center for Sustainable Infrastructure at Evergreen. It's about advancing a new sustainable infrastructure paradigm and practice, and to help Oregon and Washington in particular become national leaders in sustainable infrastructure innovation. I would like to include Idaho in there, and I've talked to Paul Woods about, how do we loop Idaho into this loop, because I think there can be a lot of innovation in Idaho too. So I came out of the nonprofit sector working on climate change solutions, didn't know a whole lot about infrastructure. So the first thing I did in starting this center was I went out and talked to 70 thought leaders and innovators from Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia to drink up their insights about where we need to go in terms of sustainable infrastructure. They're from the energy sector, the transportation sector, all the water-related sectors, waste management sectors, material management sector, I should say. And we distilled their insights, synthesized their insights into this special report, which is available on that table, and that table. And it's really about providing guidance and inspiration to not only current infrastructure decision makers, but future infrastructure decision makers and policy makers and change agents. So I'm going to highlight just a few of the key principles that came out of that report. First of all, go for the triple crown. The best sustainable infrastructure strategies combine and optimize for affordability, and affordability not just in terms of upfront capital costs, but really looking at the entire life cycle of that investment, that multi-decadal investment, and looking at the operations and maintenance costs over time and getting that whole picture. And we can finance these infrastructure systems over 20, 30 years, so it makes sense to look at that whole picture. So optimizing for affordability from that life cycle standpoint, for superior environmental performance, we have opportunities to do things so much better from a sustainability standpoint, and then resilience in the face of weather disasters, hurricanes, earthquakes, terrorist attacks, whatever's coming down the pipe. We want our systems to resist catastrophic breakdown and then recover as quickly and elegantly to get back online with these vital services as possible. If there's a fourth crown in the triple crown, I don't know if that makes any sense, but a quadruple crown, it would be also sort of factoring in which of these options that we're kind of choosing among delivers the most benefits to the economy, to public health, to the environment in our local communities. So we want to sort of look at the whole systems approach to making our infrastructure investment decisions. So from a sustainability standpoint, I sort of, on the left side, I mapped out the sustainability metrics that we landed on in the report, and then on the right side, I mapped out BioCycle, straight from the BioCycle conference website, the key areas that BioCycle focuses on, and then I added green infrastructure because I thought that was important. And I think maybe anaerobic digestion, I was just talking to Tom Miles about biochar, and that, I don't know, there's some maybe other terminology to incorporate all these energy developing kind of uses, but sort of map the connections. And it's really, really clear to me that you all are at the forefront of sustainable infrastructure innovation, because all the things that you're doing connect with multiple sustainability metrics at the same time. So it really drove home for me, just quickly connecting those dots, how important the work is that you're doing. Another principle, encourage silo busting. We typically manage these infrastructure systems in silos, in pipelines, and we have different budgets, we have different management structures, we have different mandates for these agencies, planning processes, and we usually think about our investments in these departments, in these silos, as contained. But really the best kind of solutions are going to be ones that bridge the silos and optimize across systems, identify valuable synergies between systems. A lot easier said than done. Very hard to bridge silos when we're so tightly stovepiped. Another principle is to build a better business case. So an investor, if someone comes to them to say, hey, we need $5 million to get our startup going, they're going to look at several other ways they can invest that $5 million and choose among them. Similarly, if the engineer says, this is the solution we need for this particular infrastructure problem, this is how we've done it so many times in the past, it works really well, we'd say, yeah, that could definitely be one of the options. But let's do a little brainstorming here. Let's get out of the box. Let's see what other kind of strategies and approaches we could use to address this infrastructure challenge, and then we'll compare the top 3 or 4 that we see, and we'll look at it on a life cycle basis. We'll measure the full costs and benefits, not only within our silo, our pipeline, but also looking at city government as a whole, local government as a whole, and then the broader costs and benefits to the community. And with all that information, our decision makers can make probably wiser, more cost-effective, more sustainable, and more resilient decisions in the end. Seattle Public Utilities is my shining example of this. They have 5 economists on staff that do this kind of analysis on their major investments, capital investments. Obviously, not all communities can afford to have 5 full-time economists on staff. So we're going to need to figure out how we can provide that kind of technical support to smaller communities so they can do some of this kind of rigorous alternatives analysis. And we need to be making these choices about our investments for a changing world. Since they're going to be around for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, we need to be thinking about the people of 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now. What kind of world they're going to be living in? What kind of values will they have? They're going to be living in a world that needs to be well adapted to climate change. They're going to need to live in a world that is incorporating technology breakthroughs and revolutions. There's going to be shifting demographics, living patterns, lifestyles. You look at this chart here. I love this chart kind of on the, the lower right. That sort of graphs what the Federal Transportation Bureau that's in charge of estimating our future vehicle miles traveled. If you add up all the vehicles that everybody in America drives, that's what they're trying to get a handle on. And they predicted since the late 90s this kind of straight curve. The models just keep coming up with this straight curve up. We're going to just increase the miles traveled every year right on into the future. And they've done this every 2 or 3 years and come up with the same results. But then the black line that kind of evens out around 2000 is the actual. And so we have this growing discrepancy between the actual behavior of the world and what their models keep predicting. So they're not sort of thinking about the changing world. And I think young people are much less oriented toward a car in high school. A car is going to be how I define my identity. Today, it's more social media, technology. The car is just not that big a deal to young people in the way that it was for us, for some of us. Just an example of technology revolutions and changing technology. This is from the energy sector, but Deutsche Bank notes in a report that just came out that now we're producing 1% of electricity in the world is supplied by solar power, which may not seem like much, but it used to be fractions, and now it's fully 1%. And they're forecasting that by 2050, even though the electricity market globally will be twice as big, 30% of the electricity will be from solar power. And they've sort of mapped here the cost declines that are coming between 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017. And they're saying a 40% further cost reduction in solar PV, which is probably along the lines we've seen in the last few years, in the next 3 years. It's just remarkable. And it's changing the economics of solar really, really rapidly. If you were kind of drew your conclusions 2 years ago about cost of solar, you'd be way out of date already, just 2 years later. That picture on the upper right is a solar array on the Gresham, Oregon wastewater treatment plant. So you may be able to think about how, if your operations use electricity, you may be able to think about how to incorporate solar and may be able to do it cost effectively. One other principle, build community prosperity. So infrastructure investments, they're the biggest capital investments we make in the community. They're huge job generators and sustainers, vital to local business and economic activity. So it makes sense that we should be integrating our infrastructure strategies and our economic development strategies at the community level. And it's an opportunity to insource jobs and potentially create pathways out of poverty and lift segments of the community up that have been left out before. We need to be creating those talent development pipelines. A lot of those infrastructure jobs don't take an advanced degree, technical degree, some training, apprenticeship programs. It's an opportunity to really support economic vitality in our communities, and we need to be dovetailing those strategies. In every one of the sectors, it's interesting, the infrastructure workforce is graying, and there's a retirement wave coming. So we really need to get on this and start to bring in the next generation, inspire people into this field, because it's an incredibly rewarding arena to work in, but it's not that sexy right now. We need to make it a lot more compelling, and we need to create opportunities and connect people to these job opportunities. The report highlights a number of profiles in innovation. I'm almost reluctant to even put these up there because you guys know so many other examples. I'll hit them really quickly. Clean water services, they're in Washington County in the Oregon, in the Metro Service Territory. They're great innovators. They're putting together joint business ventures to extract out different wastewater streams and derive value out of them, create high value products. They're working with a soda company to try to create ethanol that can be sold into the fuel markets. They also have this amazing project where they were looking at having to put a chiller on their outflow pipe that flowed into the Tualatin River because the temperatures were too high and were affecting fish and the like. It would have cost $90 million. Instead, they found a way to invest about $10 million upstream in cooling the river by restoring habitat and shade around the river, over 50 miles of the river, working with local landowners, building a new industry in restoration and native plant nurseries. It's been incredibly successful. It cost about $10 million compared to the $90 million they were looking at. In Albany, Millersburg, is that in your territory?
No, it's just
A little bit south. Okay, well they're doing some cool innovation too. They're talking water gardens, cools wastewater, pulls out pollutants, and it's a living laboratory for students from K through 12, university students to come and beautiful, beautiful place to walk around and observe wildlife. In Spokane, Washington, they were looking at having to spend, I think, $450 million to deal with combined sewer stormwater overflows that were impacting the Spokane River. And they found a way to deploy green infrastructure and other innovative strategies to reduce that cost by about a third, at the same time as enhancing habitat, making the community more beautiful. And they've really looked at, they call it holistic integration of their infrastructures. So integrating their parks plan, their streets plan with this plan for integrated clean water plan. Very cool. Other climate smart innovations, Portland is harvesting energy from their water pipes as water moves downhill. There's energy there to be harvested, and they're harvesting it. Eric Heinitz here with the Department of Corrections is working on a project that will recover the heat and the wastewater coming from the showers and the kitchens at the Clallam Bay Correction Facility and recycle that to replace the burning of diesel energy. Big win for the climate, big win for corrections in terms of financial savings there. Tribes are innovating. The Tulalip have their dairy digester partnership that's helping salmon. The Squaxin Island tribe has the first ever salmon-safe golf course where they are cleaning up water with a what do you call that? Biomembrane. Oh. They have this advanced wastewater cleaning unit, and then they use that for irrigation. I'm not going to steal Jordan and Ashley's thunder, but we did flag WiseRG, I think, because I don't know if that's how they say it. WiseRG? Okay. I wrote it down right, but I didn't say it right. Harvesting. You guys are going to know all sorts of better ways to handle food waste than this, but potentially a promising technology. Another future technology, I don't know. I was just reading about producing algae at wastewater treatment plants, turning it into sustainable biodiesel. I don't know how far off that kind of thing is in the future, but I'd like to keep my eye on that. How are we doing for time? We got ready to wrap up here?
You're about a little less than 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Even 3 minutes?
Okay, we can do that. So, one part of the report was really to look at it 2040 and to offer a picture just as a conversation starter. The thought leaders I interviewed were not actually, it didn't come from them because, most everybody's involved in the near-term battles day to day to make change in the short term. They're not necessarily thinking out to what's the system's going to look like in 2040. But I thought it was important to start a conversation about where do we want to be in 2040? And then we can start to, if we can get kind of clear on that and consensus on that, we can start to look at whether our near-term investments are getting us there or getting us somewhere else. Because these are such long-lived investments, it's important to think out quite a ways. So the next stage for the Center for Sustainable Infrastructure, part of what we'll be doing is diving into each of these goals that are kind of sector representative and really digging in, fleshing those out, talking to another set of thought leaders and trying to understand where we're ultimately going to try to get in each of these areas in 2040. So bottom line, we got to find a way to make infrastructure sexy, fun, attractive, compelling. We've got big challenges. We're running this infrastructure deficit. The workforce is aging. Climate change is on us. A lot of stuff that we got to deal with here. We need to innovate. We need to galvanize the public, help people understand how important these systems are, and make it a winning issue for elected officials. You know, if we can show that this is going to create economic vitality in our communities, benefit the environment, increase our resilience, save us money, that could be, I think that's a winning combination potentially for elected officials to get out in front of.
And I know you can do it. I'm counting on you.
Yeah. I mean, this group, we need to inspire a new generation also to get into this field. And if there's any kind of segment of the infrastructure community that has sex appeal, that is vital, that is attracting young people into it, and is innovative in nature, it's this organic recycling community here. It's I'm very inspired by this group. I think you're going to continue to be at the forefront. I hope we have a great conference, and I really appreciate your time.